Today, we have a lot to cover. In our last two episodes, both of which were posted within the last week, we've already looked at changes to the Florida resort and the California resort. Today, we're going to do two things. We are going to discuss a few news stories that relate to the larger Disney company, so we'll have a news roundup of sorts, mostly with stories that haven't been covered that much, and then we're going to focus in on announcements from Destination D. There is a lot to unpack here in terms of how these design concepts will reframe the Florida resort over the next 5 to 7 years. At one point earlier this week, I had hoped to include some other news stories here, but trust me, there is a lot to work through in all of this, not only in what was announced, but in how these announcements will begin to reframe the future movements of the Disney company. So we have some particularly interesting things to explore today. But before we jump into all the details, I need to thank another round of Bandcamp subscribers. As you know, we're an ad-free, listener-supported podcast, so these are the people who keep this whole enterprise moving forward. Gratitude is going out today to Mike Mybell, CSL Douglas, Jeremy, Suzanne, Morgan, and KK Wang 13. Thanks to each of you for supporting all we do here. And now let's explore the news and also take a look at what the future might look like for the Disney resort in Florida. I can tell you that my voice is already super ragged today. It's pretty much done for the week. I know it's going to be breathy and a little thin, but let's power through here because we have some interesting and timely things to explore today. We'll start today off with a news overview in which we're tracking stories that are important to the Disney company. With that, let's start with a couple of quick takes about things coming to your house. Pixar's Elemental will start streaming on Disney Plus on September 30th, and along with the feature also streaming that day is a making of special called Good Chemistry, the story of Elemental, and the animated short Carl's Date, which features Carl and Doug from Up. Though Elemental has had a 3-month theatrical window, my guess is that this will be the moment when a far larger audience is introduced to this film, which highlights the battle for Disney and other studios to figure out how to more fully monetize theatrical releases in this new environment where customer preference is clearly shifting towards streaming. Also coming to your house later this year is something new. Disney is going to release a 12-part story set in the world of Frozen that follows Elsa and Anna, only this story is not coming to Disney Plus or even to ABC. It will be released as an audio drama on podcast. The story will take place after Frozen 2 and before Frozen 3, which is a film that's presently in production. In this podcast, Elsa and Anna will need to travel into the Enchanted Forest to undo damage caused by mysterious machines intent on disrupting nature. Who sent these machines and what is their mission? These will be mysteries that the sisters need to solve. Though Marvel has experimented with original stories presented as a podcast series, this will be the first time that Disney Animation has extended one of their features into this type of audio format with an original story. This podcast series will begin streaming in October. This past Thursday, about 50 riders who are part of the WGA strike showed up to the entrance plaza of Universal Studios in Hollywood just as Horror Nights was about to open to hand out 5,000 leaflets explaining why they were striking and to build support for their cause. After 4+ months, writers are looking for other ways to make their presence felt to the studios. It feels like this month is a turning point for the strike. Earlier this week, Disney announced that it was pushing back multiple projects based on the writers and actors strike, so we can now see the outline as to where Disney executives believe the labor action is headed. Loki Season 2 will still premiere on Disney Plus on October 4th, The Marvels is still coming out to theaters on November 10th, and Echo is being moved from late November to an unnamed date in January. But after that, there is now a gap, at least until more content can be finished. Some other studios are delaying films for other reasons, such as the sequel to Dune, until their stars can help promote those titles once the strike is over. So early 2024 is when we, the audience, will first start to notice major gaps in theatrical releases and with new content on TV. In terms of Marvel titles, there's been a lot of movement in release dates this past week. Agatha Darkhold Diaries, aka Agatha Coven of Chaos, aka Agatha House of Harkness, will now premiere in October 2024 as a Halloween offering. Daredevil Born Again, Wonder Man, and Ironheart no longer have release dates, though they are expected to be released after filming resumes. This means that the studios are beginning to adjust release expectations around the realistic prospect of a longer strike, and this has caused many actors and writers great concern and prompted them to consider new ways to place pressure on studios. At the moment, theme parks are still bringing in cash to studios, even though those same studios are unable to move forward with most theatrical productions. One of those strikers who was visiting Universal Studios this past week indicated that they might try the same at Disneyland next. It's a difficult situation with no clear path forward, and our thoughts here are with everyone who is affected by this strike, with the hope that it is resolved with equity as soon as possible. The newest plan to drive up Disney Plus subscription numbers is to offer the ad-supported version of Disney Plus to new and returning subscribers for just $1.99 for the first 3 months. After that, the cost goes up to $7.99 a month. This tells me two things. First, that Disney is struggling to meet subscription targets for the current quarter, and second, as Disney is pushing the ad-supported service, the overall profits here from ad revenue and the subscription price combined is likely higher than ad-free Disney Plus at its new price of $13.99 per month. If this is true, we will likely see more promotions that incentivize ad-supported Disney Plus over ad-free Disney Plus. This seems especially likely, as ad-supported Disney Plus is about to premiere in Europe. The ad-supported version of Disney Plus will launch in several European countries on November 1st. Regardless, the last-minute attempt to spike subscriptions at the end of the quarter suggests that Disney Plus has a ways to go before it becomes profitable. Disney insists that the streamer can become profitable by the end of 2024, though at least some analysts are now suggesting that 2026 might be a more realistic target date. The move to make studio-based streamers profitable is not just an issue for Disney. It's a significant issue for most Hollywood studios. But if subscription numbers for Disney Plus are not rising, and if the losses are still significant, the streamer will remain a drag on the stock price. In another story that again underscores how media landscape is changing, at the end of August, Charter Communication, which owns Spectrum Cable, the second largest cable company in America, suggested that it might trim Disney offerings from its cable lineup. It's estimated that Charter presently pays Disney around $2.2 billion to include Disney-owned offerings on its cable services. These types of carriage standoffs between cable companies and content providers have gone on for years, in which content providers want more money for their network offerings such as ESPN, and cable providers want to pay less for that same content. One of the unique elements that Charter initially requested was to offer an ad-supported version of Disney Plus to its subscribers at no additional cost. If this went through, it would help Spectrum reposition itself more as a streaming and bundling company. I'm guessing that this is one strategy for cable at the moment. In the past, cable companies would bundle together networks into a package for consumers in which consumers had a lot of choice in content, but as the networks were bundled, consumers paid less per channel than they would if they subscribed to them individually. One way for cable companies to redefine themselves is to consider bundling streamers into a package, a situation in which multiple streamers go out to millions of subscribers, but at a fraction of the cost of individual subscriptions. But Disney at least doesn't want to go down this path, at least not right now. As usual, when cable and content companies are at an impasse, the content company pulls content from the cable service, which is what Disney did, which removed their networks from millions of TVs supported by Charter. Traditionally, this makes customers call and complain to the cable company, with some of them canceling their contracts. One person in Florida has already initiated a class action lawsuit as Charter has collected its full bill from customers, yet hasn't delivered advertised content owned by Disney. But at this time, Disney is also using a slightly different strategy. Rather than just withholding services from Charter, it released a string of social media promotions suggesting that Charter subscribers leave cable entirely and switch over to Hulu, which is largely owned by Disney, with a live TV option, as a way of bypassing the Disney, ABC, ESPN outages that are likely coming their way. Disney also explained to those same Charter subscribers that this deal would give them access to content they currently don't have. Disney told Charter customers, there's no contract, no cable box, no wait time to subscribe. They also let Charter customers know that Disney-owned content was available on other streaming services such as YouTube TV. But analysts pointed out that this arrangement likely would be a loser for everyone. Disney would not replace the lost $2.2 billion from a failed Charter deal with new Hulu subscribers, and the removal of Disney, ABC, ESPN, and other networks would likely cripple Charter as well, with a lower subscriber base. But if stock price tells a story here, it's this. The damage will likely be greater, at least in the short run, for cable companies than it will be for studios and streaming companies. If a company like Charter de-invests in the pay TV bundled package, it can refocus on broadband, which has far more future growth. And this may be eventually how this divide plays out for studios and cable companies. The studios will likely focus more on direct-to-consumer options like Disney Plus, and cable companies may focus more on delivery options like broadband. In the short term, however, both categories of companies may lose some profitability as they settle into more risky ventures and as the new media landscape settles around us. But these discussions highlight that the world of linear TV, the type of TV that most of us knew when we were younger, is now beginning to fade away. A couple of Disneyland stories to close out our opening roundup. For the past year, a class action lawsuit has been working its way through the Orange County courts in California and then later a federal court. A suit about Magic Key passes at Disneyland. In 2021, Janelle Nielsen brought suit that said that those who purchased the upper-end Dream Key from Disneyland were given the expectation that they would have more access to the parks. She understood that the park did have capacity limits. This was clear in how the pass was advertised, especially as she purchased one at the tail end of the pandemic. But the phrase "no blockout dates," she believed, would lead a typical consumer to believe that they would be able to use the Dream Key to enter the parks so long as there was capacity in the park. This was exactly how the old premium annual pass worked. You could use it so long as any type of capacity remained in the park. For her, the point of contention was that Disney closed off reservations for annual pass holders before they closed off reservations for those purchasing day tickets, meaning that it artificially lowered capacity for AP holders, essentially making AP holders a type of second-class citizens. After the suit was filed, Disney amended its terms and conditions for the Magic Key passes, clearly denoting that a pass therefore does not guarantee park entry, even on dates when a pass is not blocked out, and even when a theme park is not at capacity. Disneyland also removed the Dream Pass and replaced it with a pass that had blockout dates around the winter holidays. This suit went forward, and over this past summer it reached a settlement, which will cost Disney millions. Each Dream Key holder will eventually receive a check for $67.41. But the settlement amount and the amount individual key holders received also revealed how many Dream Keys had been sold between August 2021 and November of that same year when the suit was filed. About 107,000 individuals bought Dream Passes during those 4 months at $1,399 each, which is a net revenue of about $150 million for the parks. From this, you could reasonably extrapolate the total number of Magic Key holders. Most people didn't buy the Dream Key, which was the most expensive pass, so purchases of other passes were likely higher. In some cases, I'm guessing significantly so. And so this again places Disneyland pass holders at around 1 million. If I had to take an educated guess, I'd place revenue from the Magic Keys overall somewhere just under $1 billion per year for Disneyland, which is a tremendous amount of money. After this settlement was announced, Disney again put all new sales of Magic Key passes on hiatus, likely to reconfigure its terms and condition in line with language in the settlement to better protect themselves. The removal of Magic Keys from sale was only a minor change, as before this, the only Magic Key the park was selling was the lowest priced and most restrictive pass. All Magic Keys are still available for renewals, so if you want to renew, you need to do so before your pass formally expires, otherwise it might be a while before you can buy back in. One last little bit for Disneyland. At DCA, Rogers the Musical closed its summer run at the Hyperion Theater on August 31st. But not long after, on the marquee out in front of the theater, cast members arranged the following cryptic message out of movable black letters slotted into the mid-century board. It said, "That's the thing about endings. They can be rewritten." Now for the big question. What does this mean? Does it mean that the ending engagement date for Rogers the Musical can be rewritten? Or does it mean something else, such as the next production will be a familiar Disney property with a new ending? Maybe the story of Endgame, but one where Thanos wins, which is basically the setup for King Thanos? Or maybe the story of Peter Pan, where Pan stays in London instead of returning to Neverland? It's unclear, but the sign clearly is hinting at future offerings in this theater. But with that, let's move on to the announcements from Destination D. We now have the answer to one of the key questions we posed last week. Which matters more to Disney? Withholding improvements to the Florida resort to make a political statement that might help sway public opinion about Reedy Creek, or announcing a reinvestment schedule for the Florida resort to finally compete with Epic Universe and to fill some hotel rooms? It's clearly the latter. This year, Destination D felt more like the expo, with a constant line of announcements, nearly all of which were focused on Florida. And a couple of episodes ago, we talked about the financials and timelines for such projects. It is now too late to announce and complete any completely new attractions for Florida before Epic Universe opens. But that leaves the possibility to open projects from entertainment, which might include nighttime spectaculars, restaurants, and attraction enhancements or rethemes similar to Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Basically, if you start with an existing attraction, you might be able to have a finished product in under 2 years. Also, let's create some categories here. Let's call those additions that can be completed in under a year short-range improvements. This might be a new stage show, a minor enhancement to an existing attraction, or a rethemed restaurant. These typically are lower-cost additions. And next, let's call additions that require 1 to 2 years of work mid-range improvements, such as a modest retheme of an existing ride, a completely new restaurant, an attraction at a water park, or a significant upgrade to an existing resort area. And lastly, let's call additions that will take 2, if not many more than 2 years to complete and often a large budget, long-range improvements. In this category are new attractions, new lands, new hotels, and so on. So in our 3 categories, short-range improvements are designed to quickly improve visitation at the Florida resort within the next year. Mid-range improvements are those that have the potential to come online before Epic Universe opens, assuming Disney has the design and labor power to move quickly. And long-range improvements show the future trajectory of the Florida resort with improvements that open after Epic Universe, likely through the end of the decade. We'll group the announcements now by park. I'm using the word announcement here very loosely, as many of these are something far looser than a technical announcement. They might be target goals or progress reports on various designs not yet budgeted and approved. For the majority of these concepts, not one shovel full of dirt or one single board has been moved, so most of these concepts have no announced timelines. My short-range, mid-range, and long-range categories assume that work on these projects would begin soon, which for some of these ideas may not happen. Also remember, discussions of possible attractions in the past don't always produce actual attractions. Again, think of the Mary Poppins additions to Epcot, the Play Pavilion, the redo of Spaceship Earth, and so on. That is, keep your expectations in check as we move through these items, but with that in mind, here's how the announcements can reshape the Florida parks in the years to come. Let's start with the Magic Kingdom. In Florida, the Hatbox Ghost will debut in the mansion in November, so expect some really long lines at the mansion for the winter holidays. Next, the new show will come to Grizzly Hall in Frontierland featuring the Country Bears. This is likely an adaptation of a show once considered for the Country Bears at the Tokyo Resort. The show will be called Country Bear Musical Jamboree and will present well-known Disney songs reinterpreted as country folk or bluegrass music and staged as a Nashville-style musical review. For longtime park fans, I'd label this as the Mickey Mouse Review meets Country Bears. And this announcement is clearly directed at longtime fans. New fans rarely give much notice to the Country Bears, even though back in the 1970s, this was once a standout attraction. And so this is a bone tossed to longtime parkies who want to refresh earlier entertainment and also include elements from films likely produced by Walt. In the musical mix, I'm guessing we'll see nods to music from earlier hand-drawn features, not just Moana, Coco, Frozen, Brave, and The Princess and the Frog, which have dominated nighttime shows at the resort in recent years. That is, I'm assuming that a refresh of this particular show that appeals to longtime fans, meaning in part older fans, is also going to be paired with at least some music that appeals to that same group. If so, this will be a good multi-generational attraction. This is also a way to extend the life of the Country Bears, which without this update might have been on their way out of the park due to low attendance. It's also a way to clean up some lyrics in the current show that simply haven't aged well. I see the Country Bears brand of entertainment like this. Like many presentations by, say, the Muppets, such as in Muppet Vision, the Country Bears present an amateur variety show that continually goes wrong, from people being called off stage, to Big Al interrupting the finale, to an ongoing yet failed romance between Henry and Teddy. I would assume that with the personality of the Bears already established, these comical notes will frame the new show as well, likely with some updated cultural references. Grizzly Hall is a low-capacity theater. It has a theoretical capacity of 380 guests, which in operational terms means about 350 people in practice. I'm guessing that 3 shows an hour, with load and unload, brings hourly throughput to about 1,000 people. This show doesn't need to be a cosmic rewind-style draw with an hourly throughput of 2,000 guests to be a success. So long as Imagineers can avoid a problematic script like Tiki Room under new management, I think this is a good match for the space. Also a good use of existing assets. Beyond this is a good place to spend money, as the attraction definitely needs to be refreshed. But again, we'll have to wait until more details are announced, but this appears to be a mid-range project that is slotted for a 2024 opening. Not far away, Disney plans to also open a Pirates of the Caribbean themed lounge. Exactly where this lounge will go wasn't exactly revealed, but likely candidates are the old Pirates League Salon or the Tortuga Tavern restaurant, which is now only open seasonally. I do like this conceit. It takes ride IP, specifically those pirates, and extends them into the park, like the Jungle Cruise extends over to Skipper Canteen. The artwork does suggest an intimate lounge, and the word lounge carries the implication that alcohol will likely be served here. If so, this means that the Magic Kingdom will move on from a few sit-down locations that serve beer, wine, and cocktails to something perhaps more along the menu lines for Nomad Lounge over at Animal Kingdom. This lounge will also include the Barker Bird animatronic. This leaves what was supposed to be the big announcement, or rather the big discussion for a possible new land or lands. Again, with blue sky puffery, Disney returned to the Beyond Big Thunder expansion concept. This was an idea that was teased a year ago at the Expo. Part of the original idea was to create an Encanto area, a Coco area, and a Villains area. The Encanto area is now off the table for reasons we'll talk about in a moment, but this leaves the possibility of themed areas devoted to Coco and the Villains. But are these themes even still under active consideration? Even that was unclear. The company did confirm that they are actively working on a Galaxy's Edge-sized expansion for the Magic Kingdom, but again, no meaningful details were announced here. For me, this was the most disappointing moment in the presentation because a year later, it was clear that concepts for this expansion area haven't been pinned down much more than they were at the Expo. This is likely due to the Glendale offices of Imagineering being greatly reduced due to the proposed and now abandoned Lake Nona expansion campus, but on the upside, that Disney is again pointing to an expansion beyond Big Thunder is an admission that the company understands the capacity issues in the Magic Kingdom. The expansion beyond Big Thunder would change the overall footprint of the park and would move new areas onto unused land beyond what the park has developed so far. In park speak, this will expand the berm. But my takeaway is that Disney continues to acknowledge that its centerpiece park needs to be larger, but what will go in that expansion area is still open to discussion. That the footprint of the Magic Kingdom will expand beyond Big Thunder, possibly with a themed area and a path that extends from Big Thunder around to either Fantasyland or maybe the Mansion area, now seems to be part of the actual vision for the resort. But what will go there specifically is still unknown. I was at the expo when the original concept was teased, a possible Coco area, an Encanto area, and a Villains Land. And the only theme of those three that got a genuinely strong response from the audience was the Villains Land. I was hoping that Disney would have come away from that experience with the idea that a fantasy land for animated heroes next to a land for animated villains would not only be a popular idea, but one that would easily fit into the tones of the Magic Kingdom. But we don't seem to be at this moment, at least not yet. This is a very long-range announcement, and if it moves forward, I think we're looking at the late 2020s, and by that time, most of the current problems at the company, even the political problems in Florida, will be tiny specks in the rearview mirror. Next up, Animal Kingdom. At Animal Kingdom, the show in the Tree of Life Theater will be remade with a new show featuring characters from Zootopia. So Zootopia is in and Tough to Be a Bug is now out. My guess is that they will be able to clone some of the animatronics already developed for the Shanghai Zootopia land, which, at least in video clips, look fabulous. The one piece of concept art appears to show a Clawhauser figure, likely an animatronic, on the side stage space where Hopper now stands, while various biomes of Zootopia are explored on the screen. So an animated presentation that will explore different environments will fit nicely into the Animal Kingdom theme. Also, this is an attraction that needs to be refreshed, but I can see quibbles about how well a Zootopia attraction fits the theming for a giant tree, but the impulse to update this attraction, which is typically now a walk-on, is a smart decision. This is a mid-range addition that should open before Epic Universe. Also at Animal Kingdom, Dino Land will be going away, which is no surprise as it's been going away for a while now, bit by bit, but it will be replaced by an area themed to Encanto, or at least that's the proposal. This area will likely incorporate wildlife and botanicals from South and Central America, which is a geographic region not fully represented at the park right now. An expansion arranged around a continent like Africa or Asia will better fit the established theme of the park better than a side-by-side Moana Zootopia area that was pitched last year. This area will also add attractions targeted at families with young children, which are presently in short supply at this park. It also appears that Disney has moved on from retheming that dinosaur attraction to Zootopia and will redo it as a clone of the Indiana Jones Adventure at Disneyland. The track is already a clone of the California ride, as are the vehicles. I'm guessing that there's a lot of work to adjust the show building to accommodate the multi-level show stages of the California ride, but it now appears that this is the direction that this attraction will move. Many of the elements for this re-theme can be cloned from California. I'd place this as somewhere between a mid and long-range project, assuming it moves forward simply based on how much work might need or might not need to be done to the existing building. Let me add in one more thing here. Almost certainly Encanto and India will need to speak to each other in terms of visual theme, which would mean a South American theme for both of them. The queue for the Indy ride in Tokyo is arranged around an Aztec pyramid, which in terms of geographic region would dovetail well with the Colombian setting of Encanto. This appears to be the plan now for this expansion area. This also likely means that the previously discussed Moana boat ride, along with the Polynesian exhibit, are not moving forward at the Animal Kingdom, with Moana now mostly confined to Epcot. The Encanto area, at least in the newest concept art, includes the Encanto Casita, which is likely a family dark ride, along with a smaller attraction area, perhaps a carousel. Both will expand the offerings directed at young visitors, which is important at this park, where most experiences presently are directed at teens and adults. The Encanto area would be built more or less where Chester and Hester's and the Boneyard now stand, perhaps moving a little beyond the current borders of the park, and the Indy ride with a South American pyramid would be built where Dinosaur now stands. So this plan smartly would reuse many existing structures, which makes this approach far more budget conscious than the previous Moana retheme. I also want to point out that though the Indy film wildly underperformed at the box office this summer, the Indy ride in California remains not only one of the best rides at Disneyland, but one of the most popular as well. But I do have the sense that the company might look at the long-range value of the Indy franchise a little more closely, especially as Harrison Ford is not coming back for any more films before announcing the closure of Dinosaur. As mentioned already, both the Zootopia and the Encanto announcements speak to the need to expand attractions at Animal Kingdom, particularly for younger guests. But neither of these announcements speaks to that other problem at Animal Kingdom, that the park is a ghost town most days after 4 p.m., as the park still lacks nighttime entertainment to keep people in the gates as opposed to hopping over to other parks, specifically Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios. On other episodes here, we have already explored the problems with the Sunset Safari. It proved problematic as it presented only a few animals after dark, which led to low guest satisfaction scores, and also with various nighttime entertainment options, which can include music or fireworks too loud to disturb animals whose barn areas are largely on the peripheries of the park grounds. So even with these current announcements, this remains a problem area for the park moving forward. A couple of final things before we move on to Epcot. The Tropical Americas area also creates the possibility of expanding Disney's in-park restaurant holdings with some kitchens that slant towards South and Central American cuisine. I'm sure this has been explored in terms of evaluating the profit centers for this new land, even if most guests are only there for lunch. And lastly, I would say that the inclusion of a South and Central American area in Animal Kingdom suggests now that there are no percolating plans to add a South or Central American country to World Showcase, such as that long-rumored Brazil edition in the near future, as Disney tends to shy away from this type of tonal and visual duplication. At Epcot, we have a number of things to walk down, including some timelines that are somewhat surprising. But first, the Figment meet and greet, which was announced a year ago, has just opened with a new Figment costume. This was another announcement that generally underwhelmed the room, as the obvious problem with the Imagination Pavilion is the lackluster ride which needs attention. Again, this meet and greet is a holdover from the announcements under Chapek. At the meet and greet area, Figment, though a 2-foot character, is now a full-body costume worn by an adult, sometimes called Figzilla in the fan community. But this costume looks significantly better than the Figzilla costume from years ago. Over on World Showcase Lagoon, the new fireworks show now has a name and a date. It will be called Luminous, and it will debut on December 5th. To break this down, this means the show won't help with capacity for Thanksgiving crowds, but it will help with capacity for crowds over the winter holidays. Also, with an early December date, it will have about 10 days to bring in bloggers and other media before those traditional tourists arrive in large numbers. We've already talked about the equipment. This show will almost surely use a combination of fireworks, lasers, and water screens, which will likely present images from Disney films. We also know that the show will have both an original score and incorporate well-known Disney standards. But how will the show unify these elements into a thematically cohesive presentation is yet to be seen. Previous announcements about this show seemed wordsmithed to create the appearance of delivering information without actually revealing specifics. For example, we have been told that the show will reflect the community in all of us. You can be you, I can be me, and we can all be together in this one beautiful show. And even after today's announcement, I feel that we're mostly in this same vague space without a lot of design specificity as to what this show will present or how it will be arranged around a central message. And as significant, the opening date for this is December 5th, clearly designed to manage holiday crowds. But as we discussed last week, basic structures for this show, including barges and launch platforms, are still under construction. So I see this as an extremely optimistic date that is going to require a lot of work and a lot of after-hours testing. The push to have the new show possibly suggests that maybe not every effect for the show will be ready and tested by the time it debuts, and this, I should point out, is just speculation, but again, this concept looks promising, even if there's a truncated timeline for development, and I look forward to seeing it. More surprising in terms of a timeline is the announcement that World Celebration will open in December. This is the center spine of the park that has been closed for years. In terms of a timeline, I see this as even tighter than Luminous. World Celebration, at least as of 2 weeks ago, still has unfinished structures. It lacks hardscape and landscaping. It remains an ongoing construction area. I'm wondering if this announcement indicates that the outdoor areas maybe will be open to pedestrians, which would be a sizable improvement in terms of traffic flow in the park, even if all areas aren't finished and opened for the holiday crowds. There's no date for this opening, just a month, which again suggests that plans here are still fluid. In terms of managing crowds and overall park usability, opening most of the spine of the old Future World, that is the long corridor behind Spaceship Earth, will help significantly. But at least from what I've seen recently, I'm still having trouble imagining that this area will be completely finished within 2 months, but we'll loop back to that in December. Next, Test Track will get an update. Details here were very sparse. There was one piece of concept art which showed Test Track cars moving through a forest at sunset, but this revamped attraction was described as being inspired by the World of Motion, which was the very first ride to inhabit the Test Track building back in 1982. It was a ride with cartoon whimsy that told the story of modern transportation. The original ride had a topical theme, which was the history of transportation, and a visual theme, which was an adaptation of Ward Kimball's caricatures that slanted towards humorous vignettes. Oddly, neither of these elements was featured in the one piece of concept art that was shown on stage. The concept art presented people in a modern car on a modern road, arranged with a type of computer-generated photographic realism. And after seeing that piece of art, I did wonder how it was supposed to connect with materials from the World of Motion. But on the upside, there is this. This is one of the only major announcements that's not tied to movie IP, which I like. There's no timeline for opening here, also few details to give an educated guess as to how long this project might take, but I would say this leans probably more toward a long-range plan. One more small announcement for Epcot. Soaring will show the original film, Soaring over California, for a limited time starting September 22nd. This switchback to the original film is a familiar move to give the ride variety, a move that often plays out in California at DCA. One more thing before we move on to the next section. As Hollywood Studios only has one announcement, I'm going to include it here. The only announcement for the studios is an addition of Ahsoka Tano material into the existing experiences on Star Tours. This is a short-range project presumably opening in spring 2024, and other than that, the studios is getting very little because the studios already has some of the newest lands and newest rides. So, some overall takeaways about what all this means. In terms of the overall layout of the Florida resort, many of these announcements simply remake existing space, which will not fix capacity issues, particularly at two parks. The two parks with meaningful capacity issues are Hollywood Studios and Magic Kingdom. Hollywood Studios is getting very little, as we just discussed, so Hollywood Studios will still have capacity issues moving forward. But the Magic Kingdom appears to be on track to, at some point, build a 15-ish acre themed expansion behind Big Thunder. If so, this should improve some capacity issues at the Kingdom, but again, these plans are so raw that there isn't even an overall visual theme for the expansion yet announced. One of my takeaways here is this. The presentation of future possibilities at the parks represents a shift in emphasis areas for the company. At the last expo a year ago, the emphasis was first on streaming, with many new miniseries announced for Disney+, and then next on theatrical, with films like Indiana Jones, Avatar 2, and Elemental. Though Disney Plus and theatrical both had isolated hits this past year, as a whole these two areas recently underperformed, while parks remained profitable even during periods of low visitation. As a side note, I'm still a little bit confused as to why commercial studios are not doing more to rethink the theatrical model. The box office did bring in over $4 billion during summer, but 50% of that was from just two movies, Barbie and Oppenheimer. I do think the writing is on the wall that though movies will continue in traditional theater spaces and there will be an occasional hit, the demand is simply no longer there to support multiple billion-dollar hits each year. In 2019, 9 films passed the billion-dollar mark. In 2023, at least so far, there have only been 2. Barbie and Super Mario Bros. In my view, there needs to be an organizational shift to acknowledge that though the audience for entertainment is still definitely there, a chunk of that audience has moved on from the multiplex and is now at home, where they do want to watch films and shows. But presently what I see from multiple studios is this elaborate attempt to reinstate the 2019 model for theatrical releases rather than acknowledging that the pandemic rapidly accelerated shifts in culture that moved people away from theaters. And though a mass audience is still deeply interested in Hollywood entertainment, they are now more interested in watching it at home and also increasingly interested in watching longer miniseries and films that are more convenient to screen from a couch. Anyway, the presentation at Destination D this year highlighted the parks, one key area of the company that is financially successful. And by discussing future developments, these announcements might help refocus how investors view the company as a whole, as an entity that is now leaning more into outdoor entertainment, particularly in Florida. And for park fans, this is good news, as it shifts the public face of the Disney company more to parks and experiences, and with that increases the money that the company invests in the parks. Our next stops on this interesting journey are now in October with the opening of Journey of Water, and then November with the debut of the Hatbox Ghost in Florida, and then December with Luminous and World Celebration. And probably like you, I'm looking forward to seeing how each of these projects turns out and how each of them changes, if only a little, the experience of being inside the parks. So again, you are now all plugged in with everything that is happening with the Disney company. I'll be back next week with a new episode, one that is more focused on the history of the company. As you know, we're an ad-free, listener-supported podcast. We do just two things: deep dives on stories related to the history of the Disney studio and the parks, and news and analysis of current events as they relate to the Disney company. We are funded entirely by listener contributions. On Bandcamp, you'll find over 200 episodes not available on iTunes, but the best reason to join is to support the work we do here and to make sure that this podcast continues to exist. You can become a monthly subscriber at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. I'll also leave a link down in the show notes. So, until next week, this is Todd James Pierce.